No one was in control of the four little daughters of the millionaire widower until the new housekeeper changed everything. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. The March sun beat down mercilessly in Malibu when Lucy Smith got off the bus on Maple Avenue, firmly holding her faded backpack and a small, crumpled piece of paper with the address scribbled in pen. At 45, her brown skin bore the marks of rural Pennsylvania. Fine wrinkles around her brown eyes that revealed years under the scorching sun, but also a determination that made her gaze shine with renewed hope. Maple Avenue, 847, she murmured to herself, checking the address for the 10th time since leaving the bus station. The salty smell of the ocean mixed with the aroma of wealth that emanated from the neighborhood where even the buildings seemed to flaunt their mirrored facades, like jewels under the blue sky. Lucy adjusted her simple white blouse, smoothed the black skirt she had bought specifically for the interview, the only new piece in her wardrobe for over a year, and walked along the wide streets where imported cars glided silently over the perfect asphalt. Each step took her further away from the world she knew and closer to an uncertain but necessary future. The mansion appeared before her like a modern castle, 3 stories of glass and white marble, impeccably trimmed gardens, and an electronic gate that looked more like it was guarding a bank than a home. Lucy took a deep breath, feeling her heart race. In conversations with the neighbor who had referred her for the job, she had learned that the work was difficult. 4 girls without a mother, an absent father, and a demanding grandmother. But she also knew that the salary was 3 times more than anything she could earn in rural Pennsylvania. "It's not just about the money," she whispered to herself, repeating the mantra that had brought her here. "It's about starting over. It's about showing that I still have value." She pressed the intercom, and a female voice, as cold as the air conditioning that surely powered that mansion, responded from the other side. "You must be the new candidate. Come in. The girls are waiting." The gate opened with a soft, electronic hum, and Lucy stepped into a world completely different from her own. The front garden looked like it came straight out of a home decor magazine. Imperial palms, perfectly manicured English grass, a soapstone fountain in the center spouting crystal-clear water in symmetrical jets. Her worn flip-flops grotesquely contrasted with the granite floor leading to the main entrance. The front door was a work of art in wood and wrought iron, but Lucy knew her place. She circled the house until she found the service entrance, where a blonde woman in her 50s, dressed like an executive, awaited her with a smile that didn't reach her blue eyes. "I'm Margaret, the house manager. Mr. Edward is traveling, but left clear instructions about what we expect from the new employee." Her voice carried the accent of the upscale neighborhoods, each word pronounced with the precision of someone born to command. "I hope you are more resilient than the previous ones. The last one left crying on the 2nd day." Lucy nodded, swallowing the response she wanted to give. She needed this job more than her pride needed defending. "Can you show me the house, Mrs. Margaret? I'd like to see the environment where I will be working." "Of course, but first I need to warn you about the girls." Margaret paused at the threshold, as if gathering courage to face a battle. "Sophia is 12 and is the leader of the other 3. Too smart for her own good, she uses that intelligence to create chaos. Louisa is 10 and is the most artistic when she's not accidentally breaking something to get attention. Anna Clara, 8, is the sweetest, but follows her sisters into any mischief. And Beatrice, the 6-year-old youngest, is a real whirlwind. They've already chased away 17 employees in the last 3 years. 17. The number echoed in Lucy's mind like a challenge. She had raised her own nephews when her sister died, dealt with classes of 40 students in underfunded public schools, faced drought, hunger, and unemployment. 4 spoiled girls couldn't be worse than that. "I'm ready, Mrs. Margaret." The interior of the house took her breath away momentarily. The entrance hall had a double-height ceiling, a curved marble staircase that seemed to float in the air, and crystal chandeliers casting rainbows on the white walls. Furniture that cost more than her entire house in rural Pennsylvania was spread throughout the rooms like museum pieces. "Mr. Edward lost his wife 3 years ago in a car accident," Margaret explained as they walked. "Since then, he has buried himself in work. His company, Tech Innovations, is one of the largest in the country in the corporate software sector. He leaves early and comes back late when he comes back. The girls basically raised themselves with the help, or attempts at help, from employees who came and went." They arrived at the kitchen, a spacious area of white marble and stainless steel appliances that looked more like a laboratory than a place to prepare food. This was where Lucy would spend much of her days. "And what about the girl's grandmother?" Lucy asked, noticing a photo on the fridge where an elegant lady posed alongside the 4 girls in clearly expensive clothes. "Mrs. Helen Johnson, widow of a prominent real estate businessman. She has very clear opinions about how her granddaughters should be raised. She believes they need European discipline, not Brazilian affection." Margaret paused significantly. "She hasn't approved of the last hires. She thinks Mr. Edward should hire a Swiss or German governess." A loud crash from upstairs interrupted the conversation. Then came loud laughter and the sound of something heavy rolling down the stairs. "They know you're here. Adaptações, Lucia Ferreira dos Santos, Lucy Smith, Barra da Tijuca, Malibu, Cajazeiras, rural Pennsylvania, Rua Roberto Burle Marx, Maple Avenue, Margaret, Eduardo, Edward, Tech Solutions, Tech Innovations, Dona Helena Monteiro, Mrs. Helen Johnson, Sophia, Ana Clara, Ana Claire, Luisa, Louise, Beatriz, Bella, Mamão, Cantaloupe, Colégio Santa Maria, St. Mary's Academy." Lucy sighed. "Sophia is probably coordinating some kind of welcome for the new nanny." Lucy climbed the stairs following Margaret, observing the family portraits that decorated the walls. In all of them, a tall, dark-haired man posed next to a delicate blonde woman, surrounded by 4 girls of progressively younger ages. Happiness radiated from those photos, making the sadness that now hung over the house like an invisible fog even more evident. On the first floor, they found the scene of the mischief. A bucket tipped over at the top of the stairs, water spread across the polished wooden floor, and 4 pairs of eyes watching from the second-floor railing. "Sophia, get down here now!" Margaret shouted, her voice echoing through the halls. A tall girl for 12, with curly brown hair and defiant green eyes, slowly descended, followed by the other 3. They wore designer clothes, dresses that cost more than Lucy's monthly salary, but were barefoot and had messy hair like little rebels. "We just wanted to welcome the new nanny," Sophia said with a smile that couldn't hide the mischief behind it. Lucy looked at the 4 girls, then at the bucket, then at the puddle on the floor. For a moment, silence settled in the house. Margaret crossed her arms, expecting the explosion of anger that always came. The girls braced themselves for the screams they knew so well. Instead, Lucy began to laugh, not a forced or nervous laugh, but a genuine chuckle that came from deep within her chest, as if she had just heard the best joke in the world. The girls exchanged confused glances. Margaret frowned. "You are very creative," Lucy said, still smiling, as she bent down to examine the bucket mechanism. "You balanced it on the edge of the door, calculated the weight just right. This takes planning. Who came up with this idea?" Sophia hesitated, clearly disarmed by the unexpected reaction. It was my idea. Clever. But next time, how about we use that cleverness for something that doesn't make the floor slippery? Someone could get hurt." Lucy took a cloth from the apron Margaret had given her and began to dry the floor. "By the way, I'm Lucy, and you, besides being prank architects, have names." The simple question, asked without anger or impatience, seemed to completely disarm the girls. Bella, the youngest, was the first to respond. "I'm Bella, and that's Anna Claire, but everyone calls her Anna. Louise is the one with the longest hair, and this is Sophia, who always comes up with these things. Nice to meet you all." Lucy finished drying the floor and stood up, extending her hand to each of them as she would to adults. "Now, how about you show me your rooms? I want to get to know the whole house to see how I can help you." The rest of the afternoon passed in a whirlwind of discoveries. Lucy got to know every corner of that mansion, from the library with books that no one read to the home theater where the girls watched movies to escape the silence. She also got to know the little personalities behind the rebellion. Sophia, who secretly read philosophy books and dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Louise, who obsessively drew and hid an extraordinary talent for the arts. Anna Claire, who tended to a secret garden on her balcony and knew the name of every plant. And Bella, who told fantastical stories and had an imagination that soared higher than the planes passing over Malibu. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lucy was in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner: rice, beans, roasted chicken, and cornbread. Nothing from the sophisticated menu the girls were used to receiving from expensive restaurants or private chefs. "What's that smell?" Bella appeared in the kitchen, followed by the other three. "Real food," Lucy replied, stirring the cornbread with a wooden spoon. "Food that hugs the soul and eases the longing." For the first time in a long time, the four girls dined at the kitchen table instead of eating alone in their rooms. They talked about school, cartoons, dreams, and fears like a real family. And when Margaret passed through the kitchen before leaving, she found something she hadn't seen in 3 years. The girls laughing together without mischief, without rebellion, just being children. "Interesting," murmured the administrator, observing the scene from the doorway. "Very interesting." Outside, Malibu lit up its nightlights, and a new story began to be written in that house that had long forgotten what it meant to be a home. Lucy's first week in the Malibu mansion passed like a careful dance between the girls' curiosity and her own determination to prove her worth. Every day, at 6 in the morning, she woke up in the small maid's room at the back of the house, a simple but clean space with a twin bed, a laminate wardrobe, and a window overlooking the service area. It was a completely different universe from the girls' luxurious quarters, but Lucy didn't mind. She had slept in much worse places during her journey to Malibu. However, on the Monday of the second week, she noticed that the girls were testing her limits in a more subtle way. Sophia, the natural leader of the group, had orchestrated a series of small disobediences. Coffee spilled accidentally on the marble kitchen table, school books forgotten, intentionally in impossible places, and a suspicious silence whenever Lucy asked about homework. "Sophia," Lucy called as she prepared the morning coffee, slicing cantaloupe into perfect pieces and toasting French bread. "I need to talk to you." The 12-year-old girl descended the stairs with the studied pose of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She wore the immaculate uniform of St. Mary's Academy, blouse. Sophie wore a white blouse, a navy plaid skirt, and polished black shoes. But there was something in her green eyes that revealed the internal storm she carried since her mother's death. "Right, Aunt Lucy." The way she said "aunt" carried a subtle irony, testing how far she could go. Lucy paused what she was doing and turned to the girl, resting her hands on the kitchen counter. Her gaze, calm yet firm, met Sophie's without hesitation. "You're angry with me for being here, aren't you?" The direct question caught Sophie off guard. She expected a lecture, scolding, threats of punishment, anything but this raw honesty. don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. You're too smart to pretend you don't understand." Lucy moved closer and sat on the stool next to Sophie, placing herself at the same level as the girl. "You've lost your mother, your father is hardly home, and now another stranger shows up wanting to boss you around. I'd be angry too." Sophie felt her chin tremble but lifted her head with pride. "You're not going to stay here forever anyway. None of them do. Why should I care?" The pain behind that statement broke Lucy's heart. It was the voice of a girl who had learned too early that the important people in her life had a habit of disappearing. "You're right," Lucy said calmly. "I might leave one day, but while I'm here I can choose two things: to pretend that you don't matter to me so I won't suffer when I leave, or to truly care and hope that the time we have together is good for all of us." Sophie stared at her, trying to find signs of deceit in that sincere face. "And which one will you choose?" "I've already chosen. That's why I'm talking to you instead of just scolding you." At that moment, Lucy appeared in the kitchen, her messy blonde hair still in pajamas. At 10 years old, she was the family artist, always with paint, glue, or crayon on her hands, creating colourful worlds to escape the grey reality surrounding her. "What are you two talking about?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "We were talking about trust," Lucy replied, pouring a glass of milk for Lucy. "Your sister was helping me understand how I can be a better person for you." Sophie frowned, realizing that Lucy had turned her rebellion into collaboration with impressive skill. "Aunt Lucy!" Anna Claire rushed down the stairs, already ready for school, her brown hair tied in a perfect ponytail. At 8 years old, she was the family organizer, always trying to maintain an impossible harmony among her sisters. "Bella hid her backpack again. She doesn't want to go to school." Lucy sighed. Bella, the 6-year-old youngest, had developed a peculiar strategy to cope with abandonment. If she didn't go to school, maybe her father would stay home to take care of her. Of course, that never worked. Edward simply asked Margaret to solve the problem, but the girl persisted in her fantasy. "Where is she?" Lucy asked, already imagining the answer. "Under the stairs," the 3 sisters replied in unison, accustomed to the ritual. Lucy found Bella curled up in her favorite hiding spot, a small nook, under the marble staircase where she had created a kind of fortress with cushions and stuffed animals. The girl was in pajamas, hugging a faded teddy bear that clearly had belonged to her mother. "Good morning, Bella. Can I come into your house?" Bella peeked out from between the cushions, her brown eyes shining with contained tears. "It's not a house, it's a hideout." "Oh, I see. And what are you hiding from?" "School. I hate school." Lucy crouched down and sat at the entrance of the hideout, respecting the girl's space. "Why do you hate school?" "Because when I come back, Dad is already gone again. If I don't go, maybe he'll stay." The child's logic, both naive and devastatingly insightful, made Lucy feel a tightness in her chest. She recognized that pain, the same she felt as a child every time her father left to work on distant farms and took weeks to return. "Bella, can I tell you a secret?" The girl nodded, curious despite her sadness. "When I was little, just like you, my dad also traveled a lot for work. And you know what I found out? What? That Dad didn't leave because he didn't love me. He left because he loved me so much that he wanted to work hard to give me good things. But I don't want things. I want Dad. I know, your dad wants to be with you too. But sometimes adults get so sad that they forget that kids need love more than money." Bella came out of the hideout and sat on Lucy's lap, the teddy bear still firmly clutched to her chest. "Do you think Dad will stop being sad one day?" "I think so. But until that happens, how about I stay a little sad with you? That way you don't have to be sad alone." For the first time since Lucy arrived at the house, Bella smiled genuinely. "Okay, but only if you teach me how to make chocolate cake like Mom used to." "Deal. But first, you're going to school because smart girls need to learn new things every day." The rest of the morning passed in an organized rush. Lucy managed to convince Bella to get ready, mediated a fight between Anna Claire and Lucy over a borrowed crayon, and still found time to braid Sophie's hair in a way that made her feel beautiful and special. When the driver arrived to take the girls to school, Lucy watched from the kitchen window as they got into the car. Sophie discreetly waved at her before closing the door was a small gesture that meant more than any salary increase. With the house finally silent, Lucy began her cleaning and organizing routine, but her mind was occupied with other thoughts. She had noticed details that previous staff members had likely overlooked. The lack of recent family photos, the way the girls spoke of their mother always in the present tense, as if she were merely traveling, and most importantly, the complete absence of any loving male presence in that house. Edward Johnson was a ghost in his own home. Lucy had seen him only once, on the first morning, when he hurried down to grab the car keys. Tall, dark-haired with brown eyes that once must have been warm but now seemed like frosted glass. He greeted Lucy with a polite but distant wave, as if she were just another piece of furniture in the decor. "Thank you for taking the job," was all he said before rushing out, phone glued to his ear, discussing mergers and acquisitions with the same coldness he would use to talk about the weather. As she dusted the living room furniture, Lucy observed the portraits scattered across the shelves. A beautiful woman, blonde, with a sweet smile, always surrounded by the four girls in happy moments, at the beach, in parks, at colourful and joyful birthday parties. It was evident that she had been the heart of that family, and her absence had left a void that no amount of money could fill. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello, Johnson family residence." "Ah," finally a polite voice. The voice on the other end was female, cultured, with a clearly upscale accent. "This is Helen Johnson, the girl's grandmother. I assume you are the new staff member." "Yes, ma'am. I'm Lucy Smith. It's a pleasure to speak with you." The sound Mrs. Johnson made carried years of skepticism about domestic workers from the South. "I need to speak with you in person. I will be there at 3 in the afternoon. Please prepare tea and wear something appropriate." The call ended without a goodbye, leaving Lucy staring at the phone with a mix of nervousness and determination. She knew that this conversation would be crucial for her staying in the house. The girl's grandmother clearly had influence over family decisions, and Lucy suspected that her expectations of a domestic worker from the South were not very high. At 2:30, she was impeccably dressed, hair pulled back in a low bun, ironed white blouse, black skirt, closed shoes borrowed from Margaret. She had prepared English tea in one of the family's fine china sets, arranged cookies on crystal plates, and mentally rehearsed how she would introduce herself. When the doorbell rang, Lucy took a deep breath and went to open the door. Helen Johnson was exactly what she had expected. A woman in her 60s, elegant as a queen, wearing a beige linen suit that cost more than Lucy's annual salary, perfectly styled grey hair, manicured nails, discreet but obviously expensive jewellery, and blue eyes that seemed to X-ray the soul of anyone daring enough to look directly into them. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Johnson. Welcome." Helen entered the house as if she owned it, scrutinizing every detail with a critical eye. "I see you at least know how to use the correct china. That's a relief." They sat in the living room, a spacious area decorated in shades of beige and gold, with furniture that seemed more suited for a museum than a home where children lived. "So, Lucy, Helen poured herself tea with the precision of someone who had grown up among social ceremonies. "Where exactly did you come from? From rural Pennsylvania, Mrs. Johnson. And what brought you to Malibu?" It was a simple question, but Lucy knew that her answer would determine whether she had a real chance with this family or if she would just be another temporary staff member. "The search for a better opportunity, ma'am, and the desire to restart my life in a place where I could make a difference." Helen studied her for a long moment, as if evaluating a piece of art of dubious authenticity. "Lucy, I will be direct with you because I don't believe in beating around the bush. My son-in-law lost my daughter 3 years ago, and since then he has been making the mistake of delegating the education of my granddaughters to anyone who offers domestic services. The girls are becoming wild, lacking proper education, without the discipline necessary to become respectable young women." Lucy listened in silence, feeling the weight of judgment behind each word. "What do you intend to do differently from the 17 others who have passed through here?" "Mrs. Johnson," Lucy placed the teacup carefully on the saucer, looking directly into the woman's eyes. "I did not come here to domesticate the girls. I came to care for them. There is a difference." The silence that followed was so thick it seemed to occupy physical space in the room. Helen tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. "Explain that difference." "To domesticate is to make someone behave out of fear or obligation. To care is to help someone find their own reasons to behave well. The girls do not need more rules, Mrs. Johnson. They need more love." It was then that the sound of keys in the lock announced that the girls had arrived home from school, and Lucy realized that her trial by fire was just beginning. The sound of backpacks being thrown on the marble floor echoed through the mansion like an alarm. The 4 girls burst into the house with the pent-up energy of a whole day of classes, rumpled uniforms and messy hair, betraying the playground antics. Lucy and Mrs. Johnson remained still in the living room, each observing the other's reaction to the approaching chaos. "Aunt Lucy, where are you?" Bella's high-pitched voice cut through the formal afternoon air, followed by the sound of her shoes racing across the marble floor. "I brought a drawing I made at school." "Bella, don't run inside the house," Sophie shouted after her sister, automatically assuming her role as the leader. "You're going to slip and hurt yourself." Mrs. Helen raised an impeccably shaped eyebrow, her expression a mix of disapproval and curiosity about how Lucy would handle the situation. "Excuse me, Mrs. Helen." Lucy rose from the armchair calmly. "Let me greet the girls first." Bella was the first to appear in the living room, stopping abruptly at the sight of her grandmother sitting like a queen on her throne. The 6-year-old carried a folded sheet of paper in her small hands, and her brown eyes sparkled with happiness, a happiness that quickly faded when she sensed the tense atmosphere. "Good afternoon, Grandma Helen," she said in a small voice, making an awkward bow that someone had clearly taught her. "Good afternoon, Bella. Are you behaving well in school?" "Yes." "Ma'am?" The other 3 girls followed, each greeting their grandmother with the same cautious formality. It was evident that they loved Helen, but they also feared her. A kind of love mixed with obligation that Lucy recognized well from her own childhood in rural Pennsylvania, where children were seen but rarely heard. "Girls," Lucy intervened gently, "can you show me your drawings and projects later? I'm talking to your grandmother now, but I promise that in half an hour all of you will have my full attention." Sophie, always the most perceptive, picked up on the underlying tension in the conversation. "Is everything okay, Aunt Lucy? You seem worried." "Everything is great, my dear. We're just talking about adult things. How about you go have a snack and then do your homework? I'll prepare something special for you." Anna Clare, with her natural sensitivity, approached Lucy and discreetly touched her hand. "Grandma Helen, Aunt Lucy is nice. She doesn't yell at us or run away when we make a mess." "Really?" Helen shot a piercing look at Lucy. "And what does she do when you make a mess?" "She talks to us," Lucy replied, adjusting her backpack on her shoulder. And sometimes she even helps us make a better mess. Helen frowned, clearly disapproving of the answer. What do you mean, a better mess? Bella, momentarily forgetting the formality, jumped to her grandmother's armchair. Yesterday I wanted to paint a mural on my bedroom wall, and she said if I was going to paint, I had to do it right. Then she taught me about colors and gave me a giant piece of paper to paint on first. Look! The girl unfolded the sheet she was carrying, revealing a colorful and surprisingly sophisticated drawing for a 6-year-old. It was a house, surrounded by flowers, with a family of 5, 4 girls and 1 adult woman, all holding hands. "Who are these people in the drawing, Bella?" Helen asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity for the first time that afternoon. "It's us. Me, Anna, Lucy, Sophie, and Aunt Lucy. We're all happy because Aunt Lucy didn't leave like the others." The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Helen looked at the drawing, then at her 4 granddaughters, and finally at Lucy. Something in her expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That's a very beautiful drawing, Bella," she finally said. "Now go do your homework. I need to finish talking with Lucy." The girls said goodbye and left the room, but not before Sophie gave one last warning glance to her grandmother, a look that clearly said if Lucy left because of this conversation, she would never forgive her. When they were alone again, Helen leaned back in the armchair and observed Lucy for a long moment. "They took to you quickly. Children are like that, Mrs. Helen. When they feel someone truly sees them, they open up like flowers to the sun. And do you see in them, truly?" Lucy sat back down, but this time she leaned slightly forward, as if about to share something important. "I see 4 intelligent and loving girls who are doing their best to grow up without their mother. I see a natural leader in Sophie, a sensitive artist in Lucy, a natural peacemaker in Anna Claire, and a brave dreamer in Bella. And I also see 4 broken hearts trying to understand why the people they love keep disappearing." Helen remained silent for a few seconds, processing the words. "And what do you propose to do with this perception?" "What anyone who loves children would do, give them stability, affection, and the assurance that they are valuable just the way they are." "Lucy," Helen leaned forward as well, her voice taking on a more personal tone, "my granddaughters are heirs to a considerable fortune. They need to be educated to occupy a specific social position. They can't grow up thinking the world is a place where everything is solved with affection and conversation." "Mrs. Helen, with all due respect, the world is also not a place where everything is solved with money and social position. Your granddaughters will be rich. Their whole lives, that's certain, but if they don't learn to be good people, they will be rich and unhappy." It was then that the sound of arguing from upstairs interrupted the conversation, raised voices, crying, and the noise of something being thrown on the floor. "I don't want to do this stupid lesson," Lucy's voice echoed down the stairs, filled with frustration. "You have to do it. If you don't, you'll get a bad grade," Sophie replied, clearly trying to maintain order. "I don't care about grades. I hate math. I hate everything." The sound of sobs mixed with the shouting, and Lucy instinctively stood up. "Excuse me, Mrs. Helen. I need to see what's happening." "Go," Helen said, but her voice carried a silent challenge. "Let's see how you really handle a crisis." Lucy climbed the stairs and found, in the room of Lucy, the 4 girls were gathered, with Lucy sitting on the floor surrounded by scattered books and notebooks, crying uncontrollably. Sophie had her arms crossed, clearly frustrated. Anna Claire was trying to calm her sister, while Bella watched everything with wide eyes, not understanding why everyone was upset. "What happened here?" Lucy asked calmly, crouching down to Lucy's level. "The teacher assigned a ton of math problems, and I can't solve them," Lucy sobbed. "I'm stupid. I can't understand anything." You're not stupid, Lou, Sophie said, softening her voice. You just don't like math. It's the same thing. If I don't understand, it's because I'm stupid. Lucy observed the scene. Notebooks with crumpled pages, broken pencils, a ruler snapped in half. It was clearly an explosion of accumulated frustration, not just with math, but with everything happening in her life. Lucy sat down on the floor next to the girl. Can I see your drawings? Why? Lucy asked between sobs. Because I want to understand how your mind works. Lucy pointed to a folder on the bed. Lucy opened it and found dozens of impressive drawings, portraits of her sisters, beach landscapes, animals with almost human expressions, all executed with a surprising technique for a 10-year-old. Lucy, can you explain to me how you drew the sunlight hitting the water in this beach drawing? I looked at how the light really looks, and I tried to do the same, using the lightest pencil at the top and the darkest at the bottom. And how did you decide where to place each person in this family portrait? I thought about how we look when we're really together. Bella always stands next to Anna. Sophie always stands a little in front because she takes care of everyone. Lucy closed the folder and looked directly into the girl's red eyes. You just used geometry, proportion, and logical reasoning to create these drawings. Your mind works perfectly. It just works differently. What do you mean? Lucy picked up one of the math problems from the notebook. Let's try to solve this problem, but instead of thinking in abstract numbers, let's think in drawings. Imagine you're going to make a portrait of a family with 4 people, but you only have enough paint to paint 3. How many people will be left without paint? Lucy stopped crying and furrowed her brow, concentrating. 1 person. Exactly. 4 minus 3 equals 1. You just solved a subtraction. Lucy's face slowly lit up. So math is just another way of drawing? Math is a way of drawing with numbers, and you're very good at drawing, so you can be good at math too. For the next 40 minutes, Lucy transformed each math problem into a visual situation that Lucy could imagine. The other girls sat around, fascinated to see the sister who always struggled with numbers begin to solve exercises with growing confidence. When they went downstairs for dinner, they found Mrs. Helen Johnson still in the living room, flipping through a magazine but clearly paying attention to the sounds coming from upstairs. How was the math session? She asked, trying to sound casual. I managed to solve all the problems. Lucy ran to her grandmother, beaming. Aunt Lucy taught me that math is like drawing, just with numbers. Helen looked at Lucy over her granddaughter's head, an unreadable expression on her face. Interesting teaching method. Every child learns in a different way, Mrs. Helen. The trick is to discover what each child's way is. And do you intend to discover the way of all of them? I intend to try. Dinner was served at the main table in the dining room, an imposing setting with a crystal chandelier and furniture that looked like it had been imported directly from a European palace. Mrs. Helen had decided to stay to observe the family dynamics, and Lucy knew that every move she made was being analyzed. The girls, initially shy with the presence of their formal grandmother, gradually relaxed as Lucy led the conversation naturally. She asked about school, praised Anna Claire for helping a classmate in need, listened to Bella tell a wild story about a unicorn living in the school library, and encouraged Sophie to talk about the book she was reading, The Little Prince. Why do you like this book, Sophie? Helen asked, genuinely curious. Because the prince understands that the important things are not the ones we can see, Sophie replied seriously. Just like Aunt Lucy told Lucy today. She saw that Lou wasn't stupid, even when Lou thought she was. Helen directed another penetrating look at Lucy. And what else do you see in this family, Lucy? The question caught the table by surprise. The girls stopped eating, feeling the weight of the moment. I see a family that has lost its center, but hasn't lost its capacity for love, Lucy replied after a moment of reflection. I also see that each person is trying to protect the others in their own way, even when that protection sometimes hurts more than it helps. The silence that followed was broken by Bella, who could never stay quiet for long. Grandma Helen, are you also trying to protect us? The child's innocent question hit Helen like a well-aimed arrow. For a moment, her mask of coldness faltered, revealing a vulnerability she usually kept well hidden. Of course, my dear, everything I do is to protect you. Then why do we sometimes feel scared when you come here? The brutal honesty of a 6-year-old left everyone at the table breathless. Helen blinked quickly, as if she had been physically struck. Scared? You're afraid of me? Anna. Claire, always the diplomat, hurried to explain. Not scared, Grandma, but you always... Lucy was upset with the people who took care of her, and she was afraid that you would make Aunt Lucy leave too. I'm not upset, dear. I'm just worried about your education. But educating doesn't mean being affectionate too, Sophie asked, her precocious intelligence getting straight to the heart of the matter. Helen looked at her eldest granddaughter, then at Lucy, and then back at the 4 girls who were watching her expectantly. Maybe, she finally said, her voice softer than it had been all day. Maybe I forgot that affection and education can go hand in hand. It was at that moment that the front door opened and Edward came home from work, bringing with him the scent of air-conditioned office and corporate stress. Tall, dark-haired, in a wrinkled suit and loosened tie, he looked genuinely surprised to find his mother sitting at the table with his daughters. Mom, I didn't know you were coming today. Edward. Helen stood up, returning to her formal posture. I came to meet the new employee. We were having a very enlightening conversation. Edward looked at Lucy, then at his daughters, noticing a different atmosphere in the room. Normally, when he got home, the girls were already in their rooms or watching television. Finding them all together at the table, chatting animatedly, was a novelty. Daddy! Bella jumped out of her chair and ran to hug him. Aunt Lucy taught Lucy math, and she managed to do all her homework. Really? Edward bent down to receive the hug from his youngest daughter, a genuine smile appearing on his tired face for the first time in a long while. And she made a beautiful drawing for you. Anna Claire added, running to fetch the sheet that Bella had brought from school. And she promised she would teach us how to make chocolate cake, just like Mommy used to, Lucy chimed in, still glowing from her math victory. Edward took the drawing from Anna Claire's hands and studied it carefully. Lucy watched his expression change as he absorbed the details. 5 figures holding hands, all smiling, with a flower-filled house in the background. It's beautiful, Bella, he said, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. Very beautiful. It was then that his eyes met Lucy's for the first time since she had arrived at the house. It wasn't just a look of recognition or courtesy. It was a look from someone who had just realized that something important was happening in his home. Something he had lost in the last 3 years of self-imposed mourning. Thank you, he said simply, but the weight of those 2 words carried much more than a formal thank you. You're welcome, Mr. Edward. It's a pleasure to take care of them. And at that moment, with Helen watching thoughtfully, the girls radiant with happiness at having their father present during dinner and Edward beginning to see his family again through the eyes of someone who truly cared, Lucy knew she had passed the first test. But she also knew that the real challenges were just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the conversation with Mrs. Helen, and a cozy routine was beginning to establish itself in the Malibu mansion. Lucy discovered that each morning brought its own rituals. Bella always woke up first and barefoot went to the kitchen looking for her, still in pajamas and with messy hair. Anna Claire came down exactly at 7 o'clock, already dressed and with her backpack organized. Lucy appeared sleepily and needed extra encouragement to get ready, and Sophie was the last to arrive, automatically taking on the role of general supervisor of her sisters. It was an April morning when Lucy noticed that Edward had not left early as usual. At 8 o'clock, the time he normally had been at the office for 2 hours, she found him on the balcony of the master suite, still in his robe, staring out at the sea with a thoughtful expression. "Good morning, Mr. Edward," she said softly, knocking on the slightly open glass door. "The girls have already come down for breakfast. Aren't you going to work today?" Edward turned around, and for the first time, Lucy noticed the signs of deep fatigue on his face. Dark circles, unshaven beard, a posture that revealed the invisible weight he carried on his shoulders. "Good morning, Lucy. No, not today. I cancelled the meetings." He hesitated, as if he didn't quite know how to talk to the employee who had transformed his house back into a home. Do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course, sir. What can I do for you?" Edward gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs on the balcony. From there was a privileged view of Malibu, with its mirrored buildings reflecting the golden morning light and the shoreline stretching as far as the eye could see. "Lucy, I need to ask you a question, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "You can ask. Are my daughters happy?" The question, so direct and laden with vulnerability, caught Lucy off guard. Edward was looking at his own hands, as if he were afraid to face the answer in her eyes. "Mr. Edward, what makes you ask that? Last night I heard Bella telling Anna Claire that it was the happiest day of her life because I stayed for dinner. A normal dinner, Lucy. And she was happy because her father was present in his own home." His voice broke slightly. "What kind of father have I become?" Lucy chose her words carefully. "A father who is suffering and trying to protect his daughters from his own pain. But sometimes, when we try to protect too much, we end up pushing away the people who need us the most." Edward finally looked at her, and Lucy saw in his brown eyes a pain so deep that she almost recoiled. "I don't know how to be a father without her, Lucy. Sarah was the heart of all this. She knew how to talk to them, how to calm them when they threw tantrums, how to make them feel loved. I, Lucy, only knew how to be the father who worked to provide everything they needed. And now? Now I keep working, but they still need things I don't know how to give. You achieved in 3 weeks what I couldn't in 3 years. Lucy leaned forward, her voice taking on the affectionate tone she used with the girls when they needed comfort. "Mr. Edward, can I say something as a mother?" She had never mentioned her own children before, and the surprise on his face was evident. "I had to raise my nieces and nephews when my sister passed away, and I learned one thing: children don't need a perfect father. They need a present father." "Did you have children?" "I raised my sister's children as if they were mine. And when I was very tired or sad, they didn't care if dinner was simple or if I couldn't help with homework. They just wanted me to be there." Edward was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Why didn't you ever mention this?" "Because it wasn't relevant to the job, sir. But now I see that maybe it is." At that moment, Bella's voice echoed from downstairs. "Daddy! Where's Daddy? Aunt Lucy said he's here." Edward smiled, the first genuine smile Lucy had seen since she arrived at the house. "I think they're calling me." "I think so. And Mr. Edward?" Lucy stood up from the armchair. "Your daughters are already happy. They just need to know that you can be too." That morning's coffee was different from all the others. Edward sat at the table with the girls, still in his robe, hair disheveled, and for the first time in years, he didn't check his phone even once during the meal. "Daddy, aren't you going to work today?" Sophie asked, clearly surprised by his presence. "Not today, Princess. I thought I'd spend some time with you." "Really?" Lucy's eyes lit up. "Can we do something together?" "What would you like to do?" The girls exchanged glances, as if they couldn't believe they were being consulted about family plans. "Can we go to the beach?" Anna Claire suggested shyly. "Or to the mall," Bella added. "Or we can just stay here and you can help us with a special project," Sophie said, her mind already working on something. "What kind of project?" It was Lucy who answered, an idea forming in her mind. "How about we make a family memory album? I've seen so many beautiful photos scattered around the house, but they're all separate. It would be nice to put them together in a special place." The silence that followed was tense. Lucy immediately realized she had touched on a delicate subject. The family photos included Sarah, and Edward had clearly avoided dealing with those memories. "Daddy," Bella said in her small voice, "do you think Mommy would be happy if we did that?" Edward looked at his youngest daughter, then at the other three, who were waiting for his answer with a mixed expression of hope and fear. "I think so, Bella. I think Mommy would be very happy." The rest of the morning was spent gathering photos scattered around the house. Edward was surprised to discover how many memories had been tucked away in drawers and boxes, as if preserving them in hidden places could also keep the pain hidden. Lucy watched the family working together for the first time since she arrived. Edward, initially hesitant, gradually became involved in the activity, sharing stories behind each photo. The first time they took the girls to the beach, Sophie's 5th birthday, when Sarah organized a princess-themed party, the vacation in the mountains when Anna Claire learned to ride a bike. "Look at this one, Daddy!" Lucy showed a photo where Sarah was in the kitchen, covered in flour, laughing while Bella, then 3 years old, licked the cake batter off the spoon. "Remember when Mommy tried to make that giant cake for your birthday and it all went wrong?" Edward laughed, a true laugh, without pain mixed in. "I remember. She spent 3 hours in the kitchen, and in the end we ordered pizza. But the cake was good, even if it was crooked," Anna Claire added. "True. Your mother always said that food made with love doesn't have to be perfect." It was Sophie who asked the question everyone was thinking. "Daddy, why did you stop talking about Mommy?" Edward stopped gluing photos in the album and looked at his oldest daughter. "Because I thought talking about her would make you sadder." "But when we don't talk about her, it's like she's disappeared twice," Sophie replied with the premature wisdom that pain had given her. "Once when she died, and another time when we stopped remembering." The depth of the observation left Edward speechless. He looked at Lucy, who had discreetly positioned herself near the window, giving privacy to the family moment, but remaining available if they needed her. "Sophie is right," Lucy said softly. "Holding on to the good memories doesn't mean we don't miss her. It means we choose to honor the love that still exists." Edward nodded, a new understanding shining in his eyes. "You're right, all of you." He looked at each of his daughters. "I'm sorry if Daddy got a little lost in the last few years. You deserve to remember Mommy with joy, not sadness." Bella climbed onto her father's lap. "Daddy, can you tell that story about when you met Mommy?" "Which one?" "The one in the elevator." The other 3 girls settled around the armchair where Edward was sitting, clearly knowing and loving that specific story. "Well," Edward began, his voice taking on the storytelling tone he had forgotten he possessed, "it was a rainy Friday, and I was rushing to an important meeting on the 20th floor of an office building in downtown." Lucy smiled discreetly and headed to the kitchen, leaving the family to reconnect with their own memories. While, as she prepared lunch, she heard laughter coming from the living room, interspersed with the girls' voices asking questions, and Edward responding with details he had clearly kept in his heart all these years. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello, Johnson residence." "Lucy, this is Helen." The voice of the girl's grandmother sounded different, less formal, more human. "How are things there?" "Very well, Mrs. Helen. Mr. Edward decided to stay home today and is making a photo album with the girls." "Edward is home? On a weekday?" "Yes, ma'am, and the girls are radiant." Helen was silent on the other end for a few seconds. "Lucy, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Mrs. Helen." "How did you manage it? In 3 weeks you did something I tried to do for 3 years. How did you get them to be a family again?" The question carried a vulnerability that Lucy didn't expect from the always composed woman. "Mrs. Helen, I didn't do anything special. I just showed them it was safe to love again." "Safe to love again," Helen repeated thoughtfully. "Maybe that's what we all forgot to do." After hanging up the phone, Lucy returned to the living room and found a scene that deeply moved her. Edward sleeping in the armchair with Bella nestled in his lap, while the other 3 girls continued organizing photos on the floor, whispering so as not to wake their father and sister. "Aunt Lucy," Anna Claire called softly, "I haven't seen Dad sleep peacefully like this in a long time." "He was tired," Lucy replied gently. "Tired of being sad?" Sophie asked with her usual insight. "Maybe, but today he seemed less tired, didn't he?" The 3 girls nodded, returning to their quiet work with the album. When Edward woke up 2 hours later, he found his daughters still organizing memories around his armchair, and Lucy reading a book on the porch, respecting the family space, but staying close. "Thank you," he said simply when she came in, to check if they needed anything. "For what, Mr. Edward?" "For reminding me of who I was before I forgot how to live." That afternoon, when the girls went upstairs to take a bath before dinner, Edward asked to talk to Lucy again. "Lucy, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me about what you think." "Go ahead." Edward hesitated as if gathering courage. "My mother hired a detective to investigate you." The revelation hit Lucy like a punch in the stomach. She had imagined that Helen might do basic checks, but a full investigation was something different. "I understand," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the internal turmoil. "Aren't you angry?" "I'm hurt, Mr. Edward. But I understand that Mrs. Helen wants to protect the girls." Edward pulled a folder from a drawer in the bookshelf. "The report arrived today. Do you want to know what it says?" Lucy looked him in the eyes, making a decision. "I'd prefer if you ask me directly what you want to know. That way I can answer in my own words." Edward set the folder aside, impressed by her response. "All right. Lucy Smith, born in rural Pennsylvania, daughter of a failed merchant, teacher with a degree in education. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you came to Malibu because you lost everything in your father's bankruptcy?" Lucy took a deep breath. "Not exactly, Mr. Edward. I came to Malibu because I wanted a fresh start. My father didn't go bankrupt. He closed the stores because he got sick and could no longer manage them. I could have stayed in rural Pennsylvania. I could have tried to reopen the business, but I wanted something different for my life." "Something like what?" "I wanted to teach again. I wanted to work with children again, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could rebuild my life in a place where no one knew my story." Edward studied her for a long moment. "And why did you accept to work as a housekeeper if your training is in education?" "Because sometimes life forces us to take steps back before we can move forward. And because I discovered that taking care of a home with children is another form of education." Edward nodded slowly. "The report also mentions that you were sending money to someone in rural Pennsylvania. Who was it?" "To my father, who needs expensive medication, and to my nephews, who are under the care of an aunt." "You have family depending on you." I do, sir, and that makes this job even more important to me. Edward closed his eyes for a moment, processing everything. Lucy, can I ask you one more question? And I promise it will be the last. Sure. If tomorrow I offered you a job as a private tutor for the girls, with a salary of a specialized teacher and not a housekeeper, would you accept? The question caught Lucy completely off guard. She blinked several times, trying to make sure she had heard correctly. Mr. Edward, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Sophie appeared in the doorway, followed by the other three sisters, all clearly having overheard the conversation. Please, Aunt Lucy, say yes. Edward looked at his daughters, then at Lucy, a smile slowly spreading across his face. It seems I'm not the only one who wants you to stay. And it also seems that I'm not the only one who recognizes that you are much more than an employee. Lucy felt her eyes fill with tears. They were not tears of sadness, but of a joy so intense it felt unreal. Mr. Edward, it would be an honor. And in that moment, with the four girls rushing to hug her and Edward smiling for the first time in years, Lucy knew her life had changed forever, but what she didn't know was that the real changes were just beginning. 2 weeks after being officially hired as the girls' educator, Lucy had moved into a larger room within the mansion itself. Not the small maid's room anymore, but a room. It was comfortable on the second floor near the girls' rooms. It was a Friday in May when she decided to organize a summer party at the house, an idea that came up during breakfast when Bella asked if there were parties in heaven where Mommy was. Of course there are parties in heaven, Lucy had replied, and I bet your Mommy would love to know that you are having a party here too. The preparations took the whole week. The girls got involved with an enthusiasm that even surprised Edward, who watched from the office door as his daughters discussed decoration and menu details with the seriousness of professional organizers. Sophie took charge of inviting the neighbors and staff. Lucy was responsible for the decorations, creating colorful bunting and themed drawings. Anna Claire handled the organization of traditional games, and Bella proclaimed herself the head of food, helping Lucy in the kitchen with adorable determination. Aunt Lucy, Bella asked while mixing the corn cake batter, more flour on her face than in the bowl, is a summer party like a birthday party? It's different, my love. A summer party is to celebrate life, harvest, and friendship. It's a party where everyone is welcome, no matter who they are. So, can I invite Mrs. Helen? Lucy hesitated. Her relationship with Helen had improved since the conversation about education, but she still maintained a polite distance, as if she were assessing whether the change in family dynamics was permanent or temporary. Of course you can, Bella. Your grandmother is family. Edward had initially hesitated about the party. Traditional northeastern recipes, folk music by the pool, rustic decoration in a contemporary mansion. But when he saw the sparkle in his daughter's eyes during the preparations, any resistance disappeared. Dad, Sophie approached him on Thursday night. Do you know how to dance the quadrilla? It's been a long time since I danced the quadrilla, Princess. Aunt Lucy said she will teach everyone. Will you join in? Edward looked at his eldest daughter, noticing a light in her eyes that he hadn't seen in years. If you all want me to, I'll join. On Saturday morning, the mansion had completely transformed. Colorful bunting created by Lucy decorated all the outdoor areas. Wooden tables replaced the sophisticated furniture by the pool, and a delicious smell of corn pudding, sweet corn, and roasted corn wafted from the kitchen. Lucy was in the kitchen finishing the sweets when she heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. Helen appeared at the door, elegant as always, but wearing something surprisingly casual, a white linen blouse and a floral midi skirt that made her look years younger. Good morning, Lucy. I'm here to help with whatever you need. Mrs. Helen, what a joy to see you here. The girls will be thrilled. Helen observed the transformed kitchen. clay pots on the stove, treats spread across the counters, traditional utensils that Lucy had managed to borrow from acquaintances in the community where she lived. "I haven't cooked in years," Helen said, almost to herself. "Since I got married, we've always had cooks." "Do you know how to cook?" "I used to. My mother taught me recipes that were from her grandmother." Helen hesitated, as if accessing memories stored for decades. Can I help with something?" Lucy extended an apron to Helen. "Of course. I was just thinking of making coconut candy, but it never turns out like my grandmother's." Helen accepted the apron, and to both their surprise, her hands seemed to remember exactly what to do. While grating the fresh coconut, she began to talk about her own childhood, something she had never shared with anyone in Lucy's presence. "My family wasn't rich," she said, focused on the task. "We lived in a suburb of New York. My father was an accountant. My mother was a seamstress. Every summer we had a party in our backyard, with neighbors, cousins, everyone together." "What changed?" Lucy asked gently, realizing that Helen needed to talk. "I married a wealthy man, very wealthy, and I learned that to be accepted in the society he frequented, I had to forget where I came from." Helen paused, looking at her own hands, dirty with coconut. "For 40 years, I pretended I didn't know how to make coconut candy. Mrs. Helen. Just call me Helen, Lucy. Today I don't want to be Mrs. of anything." The rest of the morning passed quickly. When the girls came down, they found their grandmother and the educator working side by side in the kitchen, laughing at some story Helen was telling about her culinary disasters when she was newly married. "Grandma Helen!" Bella ran to her grandmother, stopping abruptly when she saw her with the dirty apron. "Are you cooking?" "I'm helping Aunt Lucy, and you know what? It's been a lot of fun." The afternoon of the party was magical. Neighbors, employees from Edward's company, some mothers of the girls' friends, everyone mingled in the pool area decorated like a summer fair. Music by Louis Gonzaga played in the background, children ran between the tables, and adults chatted animatedly. But it was during the quadrilla that the most revealing moment of the afternoon happened. Lucy was in the center of the circle, leading the traditional dance with the naturalness of someone who grew up participating in them. "Look at the snake! It's a lie!" she shouted, guiding the couples through the traditional steps. Edward danced with Bella in his arms, Helen was linked with Anna Claire, and other children and adults completed the circle. "Sway!" Lucy commanded, and everyone in the circle swayed to the sides. It was at that moment that Helen looked directly at her, and for a few seconds stood still, as if she were seeing a ghost. The music continued, the dance went on, but Lucy noticed that Helen couldn't take her eyes off her. When the quadrilla ended, and everyone applauded, Helen approached with an expression that mixed shock, curiosity, and something that seemed like recognition. "Lucy," she said quietly, pulling her to a more private corner, "I need to ask you a question." "Of course." "What is your mother's full name?" The unexpected question caught Lucy off guard. "Maria Joseph Smith. Why, Helen?" Helen closed her eyes for a moment, as if organizing distant memories. "Did your mother study education at the University of Pennsylvania?" Lucy felt her heart race. "No. My mother studied at U of P, but it was literature. The one who studied education was me." The realization hit like lightning. "Helen, you studied education at U of P." "I did, between 1979 and 1982. Helen opened her eyes, looking directly at Lucy. You are the Lucy from the second grade? The girl who always sat in the front row, who asked questions too intelligent for her age?" It was Lucy's turn to feel her legs tremble. Helen Smith? The Helen who dropped out in her last year to get married. The two women stared at each other in absolute silence. Decades of separate lives, reorganizing before their eyes. Around them, the party continued. children, laughing, adults chatting, music playing, but they were trapped in a time bubble where past and present met impossibly. "My God," Helen sighed. "Lucy, you've grown up." "Helen, I can't believe that, after all these years, do you remember me?" "How could I forget? You were the best student in the class, brilliant, inquisitive, passionate about early childhood education. We were all shocked when you dropped out 6 months before graduation." Helen looked at her own hands, still slightly dirty from the coconut candy she had made that morning. "I fell in love, or I thought I had fallen. In love. Robert, my late husband, was 15 years older, very wealthy, very charming. He said a woman of his social standing didn't need to work, that having a degree would even be inappropriate. And you believed him. I was 20, Lucy, 20 years old, and from a family that struggled all my life to pay the bills. When Robert appeared, offering a life where I would never have to worry about money again." Helen sighed. "I chose security over the dream." "And do you regret it?" Helen looked at her granddaughters playing in the pool, at Edward, animatedly talking with other parents, at the party that had transformed her perception of social class and happiness. "Every day for 40 years, especially when Sarah died, and I realized all the teaching skills I had abandoned were needed to help the girls." Lucy followed Helen's gaze. "Is that why you were so suspicious of me? Because you saw in me the person you could have been?" "Maybe. Or maybe because you were the person I still wanted to be." Helen turned to Lucy again. "You did what I didn't have the courage to do. You finished your degree, became an educator, kept your principles even when life got tough. But I also made decisions for security, Helen. I came to work as a housekeeper because I needed the salary, not because it was my dream. But you never abandoned who you were inside. I did." The two women fell silent, watching the party around them. Sophie approached, noticing the serious conversation. "Is everything okay? You both seem different." Helen smiled at her granddaughter, a warmer smile than Lucy had ever seen on her face. "Everything is fine, dear. I just discovered that Aunt Lucy and I have been friends for much longer than we realized." "What do you mean? We studied together at university over 40 years ago." Sophie's eyes widened. "Seriously? What an incredible coincidence." "It's not a coincidence," Lucy said softly. "Sometimes life conspires to put the right people in the right places at the right time." Helen nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "Sophie, can you call your sisters? And your dad too? I think it's time for you to know that Aunt Lucy is not just a wonderful educator. She is also one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life." Minutes later, the whole family was gathered in a more private corner of the party. Helen, with a naturalness that surprised everyone, shared about her youth, her interrupted studies, her reunion with Lucy. "So Grandma Helen and Aunt Lucy were friends before they met here?" Anna Claire asked, trying to piece the information together. "We were college classmates," Helen explained, "and Aunt Lucy has always been special, even at 20. Edward listened to the whole story in silence, but Lucy noticed something changing in his expression. It wasn't surprise, it was growing respect, as if each new piece of information about her increased his admiration. "Lucy," he said when Helen finished telling, "you continue to surprise me." "Mr. Edward, just Edward. I think we've passed the point of formality, don't you?" Lucy smiled, feeling that something fundamental had changed not only in her relationship with Helen, but with the whole family. When the party ended, it was already night. The last guests were saying goodbye, the girls were helping to gather the decorations, and Helen had insisted on staying to help with the cleanup, something unthinkable a few weeks earlier. "Lucy!" Helen called her when they were alone, in the kitchen, organizing the dishes. can I ask you a favor? Of course. Could you help me go back to studying? I know it sounds crazy for a 60-year-old woman to want to finish college, but it doesn't sound crazy at all, Helen. It sounds brave. Do you think I would still have the ability? Lucy stopped drying the dishes and looked directly at her reunited friend. Helen, you spent the whole afternoon playing with your granddaughters, cooking, talking to people from all social classes, organizing activities. You haven't lost the ability. You just forgot you had it. Helen smiled, a smile brighter than any jewelry she used to wear. So it's official. At 62, Helen Smith is going back to being a student. And that night, as Lucy prepared for bed in her new room, reflecting on the unexpected twists of the day, she realized that life had given her much more than a better job. It had given her a family and a friend back. But she still didn't imagine that the greatest transformation of all was just beginning. June. As the first chilly mornings of winter arrived in Malibu, a comforting routine had settled in the mansion. Lucy woke up every day at 6 in the morning, not out of obligation, but from genuine pleasure in starting the day, caring for a family that had become her own. The girls came down for breakfast, already knowing they would find not only lovingly prepared food, but also warm conversations, help with school questions, and a caring eye for the little worries they carried. Edward had drastically changed his routine. He left for work later, returned home earlier whenever possible, and on weekends stayed home, discovering the simple joys of being a present father. Helen visited the family twice a week, always finding excuses to spend time in the kitchen with Lucy, planning her return to studies and rediscovering her own essence through time spent with her granddaughters. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Lucy was preparing smoothies for the girls when Margaret, the house manager, arrived with a somber expression she couldn't hide. "Lucy, I need to talk to you. It's about an investigation." Lucy's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm. "What investigation, Margaret?" "Mrs. Helen hired a detective weeks ago, remember? Well, it seems he continued investigating even after." She was satisfied with the first report. "Continued investigating what?" Margaret hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "He dug deeper, much deeper, and found things." Lucy slowly sat on one of the kitchen stools, bracing herself for the worst. "What kind of things?" "He discovered about the boys you raised. He found out they weren't your nephews." Lucy's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "They were the children of your neighbor, not your sister. The neighbor died and left 2 small boys with no one. You registered them as your dependents and raised them for 8 years, until you managed to have them adopted by a suitable family." Lucy closed her eyes, feeling the past she had tried to leave behind in rural Pennsylvania invade her new life. "And what's the problem with that?" "The problem is that, technically, you committed document fraud, and the detective also found out that you used forged documents to get jobs in some homes in Rio before coming here." "Forged documents?" "Work references that didn't exist. You fabricated previous employers to appear more experienced." Lucy opened her eyes and stared at Margaret. "Margaret, I can explain." "You don't need to explain to me. You need to explain to Mr. Edward, because the report is arriving today, and when he reads—" Margaret sighed. "Lucy, you lied on your resume. You forged documents, and you took responsibility for children who weren't legally yours. Edward is going to have to fire you." At that moment, the girls' voices approached the kitchen, excitedly talking about a school presentation happening on Friday. "Aunt Lucy," Bella rushed in, still in her pajamas. "You're coming to our presentation, right? The teacher said we could invite special people." Lucy forced a smile, hugging the girl. "Of course I will, my love." But inside, she knew it might be a promise she couldn't keep. The rest of the morning passed like a waking nightmare. Lucy went through her routine: breakfast, getting the girls ready for school, organizing the house, but her mind was elsewhere. She knew that when Edward came home from work, her life in that house would come to an end. At 3 in the afternoon, Helen arrived for the weekly tea they had institutionalized since their reunion. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "Lucy, you look pale. Did something happen?" Lucy told her everything: the ongoing investigation, the discoveries, the document fraud. Helen listened in, silence, her expression gradually closing off. "Lucy," she finally said, her voice taking on the cold tone Lucy hadn't heard in weeks, "you lied to us." "I didn't lie about who I am, Helen. I lied about my work experience because I desperately needed a job. And the boys, you told us they were your nephews, because it's easier to explain that way than to say I found 2 orphaned children on the street and raised them as if they were my own." Helen stood up from the table, beginning to pace the kitchen with the agitation of someone processing. "A betrayal. You don't understand the gravity of this. Edward trusts you with his daughters. How can he continue to trust knowing you forged documents?" "Helen, please." "No, there's no please that will fix this, Lucy." The use of the affectionate nickname sounded bitter. "You put this family at risk. If someone finds out that Edward employs a person with forged documents, it could harm his business, the family's reputation." "I would never do anything to harm this family." "But you already have, lying from day one." The argument was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Edward had arrived earlier than usual, and the raised voices in the kitchen immediately drew him in. "What's going on here?" he asked, appearing in the doorway with a folder in hand, clearly the investigation report. Helen and Lucy exchanged glances, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. "Edward," Helen said, regaining her composure, "we need to talk about some findings." Edward looked at the folder he was holding, then at the 2 women. "I assume this is about this," he said, lifting the folder. "Margaret called me at the office. I've read everything." Lucy felt her legs weaken. "Edward, I can explain." "You can," he said calmly. "But first I want my mother to sit down, and I want you to tell me, in your own words, the whole truth." Helen reluctantly sat down. Lucy remained standing, like a defendant before a court. "Edward, when I arrived in Rio, I had no experience as a domestic worker. I had experience as a teacher, but I knew no one would hire me to take care of a house and children with a degree in education. So I invented work references." "Continue." "And the boys I raised, they weren't my nephews. They were the children of a neighbor who passed away from cancer, had no family, nowhere to go. They were going to be sent to foster care in terrible conditions. So Lucy's voice broke. "I lied to the authorities, said they were my sister's children, and I raised them for 8 years. You abandoned them?" "No, I found a wonderful family that wanted to adopt them legally, a family that could give them things I could never provide, but I kept in touch. They know they can always count on me." Edward absorbed the information in silence for a few seconds. "Is there anything else you haven't told us?" "No, Edward, that's all." Helen spoke for the first time since Edward arrived. "Edward, she lied about the documents. That's a crime. You can't have a criminal taking care of the girls." "Criminal?" Edward's voice took on a cold tone that Lucy had never heard before. But the coldness wasn't directed at her. "Mum, are you calling a woman who saved 2 orphaned children from abandonment a criminal?" "Edward, she forged documents." "So what?" Edward turned to his mother, his eyes shining with an intensity that left Helen speechless. "So what?" "Mum, in 3 months this woman has done more for my daughters than all the qualified and well-referenced professionals who have been here in the last 3 years. But Edward, no, Mom. This time, you will listen to me. Edward slammed the folder on the counter hard enough to make noise. Lucy lied on her resume because she needed to work. She raised 2 orphan children because they needed a mother. In what world does that make her a bad person? Helen tried to respond, but Edward continued. Do you want to know what I see when I look at Lucy? I see the woman who taught Lucy that math can be fun. I see the woman who helps Bella sleep without nightmares because she sings to her every night. I see the woman who helped Sophie understand that being smart is a gift, not an obligation. I see the woman who taught Anna Claire that caring for others is important, but caring for oneself is too. Tears began to stream down Lucy's face, but she remained silent. And you know what else I see? I see the woman who returned my daughters to me, who taught me that being a father isn't just about working to provide material things, who showed me that I can be a better man than I thought I could be without Sarah. Helen was pale. Edward. Mum, you hired a detective to investigate Lucy because you had prejudice, because you thought a poor woman from the South couldn't be good enough for your granddaughters. And when the first report proved you wrong, you ordered him to keep investigating until he found something that justified your prejudice. That's not true. It is exactly true. Edward stepped closer to his mother. And now that he found something that, by the way, only makes Lucy more admirable in my eyes, you want me to fire her? Helen remained silent, clearly shaken by her son's reaction. Edward turned to Lucy. Lucy, did you lie on your resume? I did. Do you regret it? I regret lying. I don't regret getting this job. Would you do it again? Lucy hesitated, thinking about the question. If it were the only way to reach this family, yes, Edward, I would do it all again. Edward smiled, a sad but genuine smile. Then it's decided. You stay here. And if my mother can't accept that... He looked at Helen. Mum, the doors of this house will always be open for you, but not if you come to judge the people who are part of our family. Helen stood up from her chair, grabbed her bag, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped and turned. Edward, I hope you don't regret this decision. Mom, Edward said softly, the only thing I regret is taking so long to make it. When Helen left, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. Lucy remained still processing everything that had happened. Edward. Lucy. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Lucy finally sat down, feeling the weight of the last few months. Because I was afraid you would be like all the other employers, that you would judge my ability by my background, not by my results. And now, are you still afraid? Lucy looked at the man who had become much more than her boss, who had become her family, her friend, her protector. No, now I know you are different from all the other employers. Edward nodded. Good, because you are also different from all the other employees. That afternoon, when the girls returned from school, they found Lucy crying in the kitchen, not out of sadness, but out of relief and gratitude. And when they asked what had happened, she simply said, "Sometimes people surprise us, girls. Sometimes they are much better than we expected." But none of them knew that Helen was at home, thinking about everything that had been said, questioning for the first time in decades whether her values and judgments were truly correct, and that this reflection would change everything in the coming days. 3 days passed since the confrontation in the kitchen, and Helen's absence weighed on the entire family like a heavy cloud. The girls constantly asked why their grandmother hadn't shown up for Tuesday tea, why she hadn't returned their calls, why she seemed to have simply disappeared from their lives. Edward maintained a facade of normalcy, but Lucy noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he checked his phone, waiting for a message that never came. On Friday, the day of the school presentation the girls had been looking forward to, Lucy woke up with a heavy feeling in her stomach. She had promised to be there, and she would keep that promise, but she knew that the absence of their grandmother would leave a noticeable void in the family audience. "Aunt Lucy," Sophie appeared in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, earlier than usual. "Do you think Grandma Helen will show up today?" The question everyone was thinking had finally been voiced. "I don't know, my dear, but I know that regardless, you all will give a beautiful presentation, and everyone who is there will be very proud of you." "But why is she mad at you? You didn't do anything wrong." Lucy knelt down to Sophie's level, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes, Sophie, people need time to understand things. Your grandma isn't exactly mad at me. She's trying to figure out how she feels about some truths she's learned." "What truths?" "Truths about who I am, about the choices I've made in life, and mostly truths about herself." Sophie furrowed her brow, her precocious intelligence processing the layers of meaning in Lucy's words. "Do you think she'll discover these truths in time for our presentation?" "I hope so, dear. I really do." The rest of the morning passed in the usual rush of getting ready for school, but with a different energy. The girls were visibly nervous, not just about the presentation, but about the uncertainty of their grandma's presence. Edward left later than usual, promising to be at the academy by 2 in the afternoon, the scheduled time for the event. At 11 in the morning, while Lucy was tidying up the house, the doorbell rang. Her heart raced when she saw Helen through the peephole. Elegant as always, but with something different in her posture, something that seemed like disguised vulnerability. "Good morning, Helen," Lucy said as she opened the door, keeping her voice neutral. "Good morning, Lucy. May I come in? I need to talk to you." "Of course." They headed to the living room, but this time the atmosphere was charged with unresolved tension. Helen sat at the edge of the armchair as if ready to flee at any moment. "Lucy, I've come to apologize." The words came out abruptly, as if Helen had rehearsed them many times to get them out. "You don't have to." "I do." Helen raised her hand, interrupting. "I need to because I've spent the last 3 days replaying everything that happened, everything that was said, and mostly everything that I felt." Lucy waited in silence. "When Edward confronted me about my prejudices, my first reaction was indignation. How dare he accuse me of prejudice when I was just trying to protect the girls?" Helen paused, taking a deep breath. "But last night, while looking at old photos from my youth, I found my college thesis." "Your thesis?" "A study on how social prejudice affects childhood education, about how children from poor families are harmed by educators who judge their abilities based on economic background." Helen smiled bitterly. "At 20, I was passionate about fighting exactly the kind of prejudice I showed against you." Lucy felt something loosening in her chest. "Helen, let me finish, please. Rereading my own thesis, I realized how I've become exactly the kind of person I criticized when I was young. I realized that 40 years of social privilege made me completely forget where I came from and the values I once considered fundamental." Helen stood up and walked to the window, looking at the garden where Lucy had taught the girls to plant. "Do you know what scared me the most about this reflection? It wasn't realizing I was wrong about you. It was realizing I was wrong about myself decades ago." "What do you mean?" Helen turned around, and Lucy saw tears held back in her eyes. "Lucy, you forged documents to get a job. I forged my entire personality to gain social acceptance. Which of us committed the greater crime?" The silence that followed was thick with mutual understanding. "Helen, you didn't forge your personality. You adapted it to survive in a different world." "No, Lucy, I betrayed it. And how do I know this? Because when I'm with you, when I make candy, when I play with The girls, when I talk about education, I feel like the 20-year-old Helen, the Helen I abandoned to become Mrs. Helen Johnson. Lucy stepped closer to her friend. But you can choose to be both, Helen. You can be the elegant and cultured woman you've become, and also the passionate young woman about education you've always been. Do you think? I do. And more than that, I think your granddaughters need to know both versions of their grandma. Helen smiled through her tears. Speaking of the girls, I also came here to ask if I can go to their presentation. Today, if you don't mind my presence. Helen, they've been asking for you since Tuesday. Of course you can come. And you? Do you forgive me for being so unfair? Lucy extended her hands to Helen, who accepted them immediately. Helen, there's nothing to forgive between true friends. There are only things to understand. The two women embraced. An embrace that carried 40 years of separate lives, 3 days of hurt, and the promise of a future where they could be authentic with each other. Lucy, Helen said when they pulled apart, can I ask you one more favor? Of course. Can you help me find information on how to resume my studies? I want to finish my degree in education at 62, but I want to finish. Lucy smiled, the same radiant smile that had won over the girls. It would be an honor to help you, teacher Helen. At 2 in the afternoon, the auditorium of St. Mary's Academy was filled with proud families waiting for the end-of-semester presentation. Edward arrived promptly, finding Lucy and Helen already seated in the 3rd row, animatedly discussing modern educational methods. Mom! Edward sat down next to Helen, his voice carrying a mix of surprise and relief. You came. Of course I came. I wouldn't miss my granddaughter's presentation for anything in the world. Edward looked at Lucy, who discreetly nodded, indicating that peace had been made. How are things between you two? We're discovering that we have much more in common. What we thought, Helen replied, and that 40 years of separation couldn't erase a true friendship. The presentation began with the first graders singing a song about the seasons of the year. Bella appeared on stage in a yellow dress representing summer, her clear and sweet voice echoing through the auditorium. When she waved to the audience, her eyes sparkled upon seeing the 3 most important adults in her life sitting together in the 3rd row. Anna Claire participated in a skit about the environment, portraying a tree that teaches about sustainability. Her shy yet dedicated performance earned warm applause from the audience. Lucy showcased an art exhibition, enthusiastically explaining her painting techniques to the visiting parents. But it was Sophie's participation that moved the family the most. She had been chosen to recite a poem about family, and when she stepped onto the stage, she searched for familiar faces in the audience before beginning. This poem is called What is Family? She announced with the confidence of her 12 years. Family is not just those who are born together. It's those who choose to stay together, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Family is those who love you just the way you are and help you become who you want to be. During the recitation, Edward felt his eyes welling up. Helen discreetly held Lucy's hand, understanding that those words perfectly applied to the situation they were in, and Lucy smiled, seeing in Sophie's presentation the reflection of everything they had built together over the past months. When the presentation ended, the girls rushed to find the family at the auditorium exit. The joy on their faces upon seeing the 3 adults together was palpable. "Grandma Helen, you came!" Bella threw herself into her grandma's arms. "Of course I came, my dear. I wouldn't miss this for anything." "And did you two make up?" Anna Claire asked, ever observant. "We did more than that," Helen replied, looking at Lucy. "We decided that we are much stronger together than apart." On the way home, with the girls chattering excitedly in the back seat about the details of the presentation, Edward drove with a sense of completeness he hadn't felt in years. "Lucy," he said when they stopped at a traffic light. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on us, even when it would have been easier." "Edward, family doesn't give up on family, and you all have become my family." Helen, sitting in the passenger seat, turned to look at Lucy. "You know, Lucy, maybe life conspired to bring us back together just when we all needed each other." "I think so," Lucy replied. "I believe everything happened at the right time." That night, during dinner, Helen made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Girls, I want to share some news with you. I'm going back to college." "Grandma is going back to school?" Bella asked, her eyes wide. "Not exactly school, dear, college. I'm going to finish my degree in education." Sophie, always the first to grasp the implications, asked, "Does that mean you're going to be a teacher like Aunt Lucy?" "I hope one day I can be half the teacher Aunt Lucy is," Helen replied, smiling at her. "Friend." And in that moment, with the family gathered around the table, laughing and making plans for the future, Lucy knew that all the difficulties, all the tears, all the moments of uncertainty had been worth it. She had found not just a job, but a home, not just a role, but a purpose, not just colleagues, but a real family. And the best was yet to come. August arrived with a subtle but significant change in the household dynamics. Helen had officially enrolled in a degree completion program for education at State University, and 3 times a week she arrived at the mansion carrying books, notes, and a youthful energy that surprised everyone. Her visits were no longer formal, but study sessions with Lucy, where they rediscovered educational theories and planned activities for the girls. "Did you know there's a theory called effective pedagogy?" Helen asked one Wednesday afternoon, flipping through a book on contemporary teaching methods. They were sitting on the porch, enjoying the weak winter sun of California, while the girls did their homework in the room. "I do. John Dewey talks a lot about that," Lucy replied, organizing a stack of math exercises she had, prepared especially for Lucy. "The idea that true learning only happens when there is an emotional bond between educator and student. That's exactly what you did with the girls, isn't it? And with me, too." Lucy looked up from her papers. "What do you mean with me?" "You educated me again, Lucy. You taught me that I could become who I always was inside, but had forgotten." Helen closed the book and looked at her friend. "You know what's the most incredible part of going back to school? What? Discovering that my brain still works, that I can still learn new things, question concepts, have my own ideas. For 40 years, I thought my only role was to be elegant and agree with others' opinions." At that moment, Sophie appeared on the porch, bringing a piece of paper and a worried expression. "Aunt Lucy, can you help me with an essay?" "Of course, my love. What's the topic?" "Write about a person you admire and explain why." Sophie sat on the floor between the 2 women. "The problem is, I want to write about 2 people, but the teacher said it has to be just one." "And who do you want to write about?" Helen asked. "About both of you. But I don't know how to explain that you are one person, like 2 parts of the same special person." Lucy and Helen exchanged glances, touched by the girl's perspective. "Why do you think we are 2 parts of the same person?" Lucy asked. "Because Grandma Helen is super smart and knows things from books, but sometimes forgets how to talk with child. And you, Aunt Lucy, know how to talk to children better than anyone, but sometimes you don't know how to explain difficult things to study. But when you 2 are together, you know everything." Helen laughed, a genuine laugh. "This girl is a genius. She just perfectly described what teamwork is." "Sophie," Lucy said, "how about you write about how 2 different people can complement each other? You can use us as an example, explaining that admiration can be about people who inspire us to be better together." "Can I do that?" "You can try. If the teacher doesn't accept it, we'll help you choose just one." Sophie ran off to write her essay, and Helen watched the girl walk away. "Lucy, can I tell you something? I've been thinking." "Of course." "I think these girls need more than just formal education. They need to see examples of strong, independent women who make brave choices." Helen paused. "And I think we can be those examples." "What do you mean?" "You rebuilt your life from scratch. I'm rebuilding mine at 62. What more powerful message could we give them?" Before Lucy could respond, Anna Claire appeared on the porch, carrying a watering can and wearing tiny gardening gloves. "Aunt Lucy, can you help me water the plants? Some are turning yellow and I don't know what to do." "Of course, dear. Let's see what's happening." The little garden that Anna Claire had created on her bedroom porch had expanded to various corners of the house. The girl showed a natural talent for botany, knowing the scientific names of plants that many adults didn't even know existed. "Look here, Aunt Lucy." Anna Claire pointed to a fern with yellowing leaves. "I think it's sick." Lucy examined the plant carefully. "It's not sick, my love. It's getting too much water. See how the soil is soaked? Some plants prefer to be a little dry between waterings." "How do you know that?" "My grandma had a huge garden in the countryside. She taught me that each plant has its personality, its way of asking for what it needs." Helen, who had been following the conversation, approached the two. "Anna Claire, have you thought about making a notebook about your plants, recording their names, specific care, how they grow?" Anna Claire's eyes lit up. "Like a plant diary?" "Exactly. Your own scientific project." "Can I do that? Will you help me, Grandma Helen?" "It would be a pleasure, dear. We can research botany together." That afternoon, while Anna Claire and Helen worked on the botanical diary project, Lucy went to find Lucy, who was in her room surrounded by art supplies, working on something that seemed much more complex than her usual drawings. "What are you doing, Lou?" "A painting for the school art exhibition. But it's turning out terrible." Lucy threw the paintbrush on the table in frustration. "I want to paint our family, but I can't make it look right." Lucy observed the canvas. It was clearly a work in progress. Figures sketched, colors tested in corners, but a composition that had not yet found its balance. "Why do you think it's not looking right?" "Because our family is strange. It's not like other families. How do I paint a family where the mom has died, the dad is hardly ever around, the grandma is going back to school, and you, well, you. And what about me? You're not a mom, you're not a grandma, you're not a housekeeper, you're you. How do I paint that?" Lucy sat on the bed next to Lucy. "Lou, how about you paint not how our family looks, but how our family feels?" "What do you mean? Instead of trying to paint people who fit into categories, how about painting the feeling of being at home, of feeling loved, of having people who care about you?" Lucy picked up a pencil and began to sketch. "Like colors that represent feelings?" "It could be, or shapes, or symbols. What represents family to you?" "Holding hands, laughter in the kitchen, hugs before bed, someone asking how your day at school was and really wanting to know the answer." "Then paint that." Lucy returned to work with renewed energy, and Lucy went to find Bella, who had been suspiciously quiet all afternoon. She found the youngest in Edward's room, sitting in his office chair, flipping through a business magazine with comical seriousness. "Hi, Bella, what are you doing?" "Trying to understand Dad's work so I can help him." Lucy sat on the arm of the chair. "Why do you want to help your dad?" "Because he gets too tired at work and then he doesn't have energy to play with us. So I thought if I learn about his work I can help, and then he gets less tired." The child logic, both sweet and concerning, touched Lucy's heart. Bella, you already help your dad in a very special way. How? By giving him a reason to work. He works so hard because he wants to provide good things for you. But do you know what he wants most in the world? What? To see you happy, and when you smile at him, when you tell him about your day, when you give those tight hugs, you're giving him the most important thing there is. More important than money? Much more important than money. Bella closed the magazine and climbed into Lucy's lap. Aunt Lucy, do you think Dad still feels sad about Mom? I think he'll always miss Mom, Bella, but I don't think he feels sad all the time like he used to. Because of you. The direct question caught Lucy off guard. Because of you all, dear. Because you remind him every day that he has so much to be happy about. At that moment, Edward came home from work earlier than usual, finding the house in a different kind of activity. Helen and Anna Claire researching. In the computer room about plants, Sophie was writing intently at the kitchen table. Lucy was painting with loud music in her room, and Lucy was chatting with Bella in her own room. "What's this commotion?" she asked, smiling. "It's the movement of a family that's growing," Lucy replied, coming down with Bella in her arms. That night, during dinner, each girl shared her projects from the day. Anna Claire talked about her botanical journal. Lucy showed the first sketches of her painting about family feelings. Sophie read excerpts from her essay about people who complete each other. And Bella announced that she had decided to be Dad's official happiness helper. Edward listened to each story with genuine attention, asking questions, giving suggestions, showing real interest in the inner worlds of his daughters. "You know what I'm noticing?" he said when they all finished speaking. "What, Dad?" Sophie asked. "That you're all becoming amazing people. Each of you is discovering your own talents, your own interests, and that makes me prouder than anything in the world." Helen, who had stayed for dinner, watched the scene with teary eyes. "Edward, can I say something?" "Of course, Mom." "You've become the father that Lucy always knew you could be." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but filled with recognition and gratitude. "And you all," Helen continued, looking at the girls, "are becoming the young women she would be proud to see." "Grandma Helen," Bella said with her usual frankness, "you're getting cooler too." The whole table erupted in laughter, and Helen laughed the hardest. "Thank you, Bella. I think that's the best compliment I've ever received." That night, after the girls went to bed and Helen returned home, Edward found Lucy in the kitchen, organizing things for the next day. "Lucy, can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Are you happy here?" The question surprised her. "Very happy, Edward. Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes I worry. If we're asking too much of you, you take care of the girls, help my mum with her studies, manage the house, give me advice." Edward paused. "And I don't know if we're giving anything back to you." Lucy stopped organizing the dishes and looked directly at him. "Edward, you've given me a family. You've given me a purpose. You've given me the chance to be the best version of myself." She smiled. "What more could I want? A future of your own goals, dreams that don't depend on taking care of others." Lucy considered the observation for a moment. "Do you know what my biggest dream is, Edward?" "What?" "To see these girls grow up, become strong and independent women, and know that I had a small part in that formation. To see Helen fulfill the dream she abandoned at 20. To see you continue discovering that you can be a father and a fulfilled man at the same time." Edward studied her carefully. "And then, when all of this happens?" "Then," Lucy smiled, "then I will find other families that need someone who believes in them, because I've discovered that this is my mission in the world." And that night, As Edward went upstairs to sleep, thinking about Lucy's words, he realized there was something more growing in his heart, beyond gratitude and respect. But it would take him a few weeks to name exactly what that feeling was. September brought with it the promise of spring and an even deeper transformation in the family dynamic. Helen had excelled so much in her studies that the university professors invited her to participate in a research project on adult education. The girls showed remarkable emotional maturity for their ages. Sophie had been chosen as class representative. Anna Claire had started a gardening club at school. Lucy had won first place at the art fair, and Bella had developed a confidence that made her shine in all social activities. But it was Edward who was undergoing the most silent and profound transformation. Lucy began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He came home earlier whenever possible, actively participated in conversations during dinner, and most importantly, he began to seek her out for conversations that went far beyond topics related to the girls. It was a Tuesday night when everything changed definitively. The girls had already gone. Upstairs to sleep, Helen was home studying for an important exam, and Lucy was tidying up the kitchen after dinner. Edward, who usually went upstairs right after meals, stayed in the living room, flipping through a magazine without paying real attention to the content. "Edward," Lucy called from the kitchen door, "would you like some tea? You seem restless." "I would, thank you." He set the magazine aside and headed to the kitchen, sitting at the counter where he usually watched her prepare meals. Lucy put the water on to boil and turned to him. "Did something happen at work?" "No, work is fine. In fact, it's great. I managed to close a big contract today, one that could triple the company in the next 2 years. "That's wonderful. Why aren't you more excited?" Edward hesitated, as if organizing complex thoughts. "Lucy, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Have you ever been married? Had serious boyfriends?" The question caught her completely off guard. In all the months she had worked there, Edward had never shown curiosity about her personal life beyond the professional. "I've had a few relationships, yes, but I've never married. Why do you ask?" "Because—" Edward paused, clearly struggling with the words. "Because I've been thinking a lot about how my life has changed since you arrived here. And it's not just about the girls, Lucy. It's about me, too." Lucy served the tea with slightly trembling hands, realizing that the conversation was taking a turn she hadn't expected. "What do you mean about you?" "In the last 3 years, since Lucy passed away, I convinced myself that my romantic life was over. That I would always be a widower, always alone, always just the girl's dad." Edward accepted the teacup, but did not. "A drink. But you came and... I can't explain it well, but you made me remember that I am a man, not just a dad." Lucy's heart began to race. "Edward, let me finish, please. I know this might sound strange, inappropriate perhaps. You work here taking care of my daughters, and I shouldn't be mixing things up." He finally looked directly into her eyes. "But I can no longer pretend that you are just the girl's educator." "What are you trying to say?" Edward stood up from the stool and walked to the kitchen window, turning his back to her. "I'm trying to say that I've fallen in love with you, Lucy, and I don't know what to do about it." The words hung in the air of the kitchen like a revelation that changed everything. Lucy felt her legs weaken and leaned against the counter. "Edward, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now. I know it's complicated. I know it could jeopardize everything we've built so far, but I couldn't keep this to myself any longer." Lucy closed her eyes, trying to organize the storm of feelings that his confession had awakened. "Can I be honest with you? Please. I also feel something special for you. But I'm very scared, Edward." He turned to face her. "Scared of what?" Scared that if anything goes wrong between us, I would lose not only you but the girls too. This family has become everything to me. The thought of losing them—" Her voice broke. Edward stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "Lucy, do you think I would risk the girls' happiness? That I would risk losing the most important person who has entered our lives? It's not that, Edward. It's just, look at the difference between us. You are a successful businessman. I'm a teacher working as a housekeeper. You have a social standing. Stop," Edward interrupted firmly. "Stop that. Do you think I care about social standing after everything we've been through? Do you think your background matters to me after seeing the extraordinary woman you are?" Lucy looked at him, seeing a sincerity in his brown eyes that both frightened and warmed her. "Edward, what if it doesn't work out? What if I can't be the woman you need? What if it does work out? What if—" "You are exactly the woman I need, and I am the man you deserve." Before either of them could say anything more, the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs alerted them that one of the girls was awake. They instinctively stepped away, returning to their previous positions when Sophie appeared in the kitchen. "Dad, Aunt Lucy, I heard voices and thought maybe—" Sophie paused, observing the tension in the air. "Were you fighting?" "No, sweetheart," Edward said quickly. "We were just talking. Why did you come down?" "I had a nightmare. I dreamed that Aunt Lucy was leaving and that we would never see her again." Lucy and Edward exchanged glances, both realizing the irony of the situation. "Come here, my love." Lucy extended her arms to Sophie, who nestled against her. "It was just a bad dream. I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "I promise." Edward watched the scene, Lucy comforting his daughter, Sophie calming down in the arms of the woman who had become her mother figure, and felt a certainty grow in his chest. After taking Sophie back to bed and making sure she had fallen asleep, Lucy returned to the kitchen to find Edward still there, waiting. Did she go to sleep? She did. "Edward, about what we talked about." "Lucy, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Can you think about what we discussed? You don't have to give me an answer now, but can you consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could build something beautiful together?" Lucy studied him. His slightly disheveled hair, the vulnerable expression, the way he awaited her response as if his happiness depended on it. "Can I ask you something too?" "Of course." "If we decide to try, whatever this becomes, do you promise that the girl's happiness comes first, always?" "I promise." "But Lucy—" "Yes. I think the girl's happiness includes seeing their dad truly happy, and you make me happy in a way I haven't felt in years." In the week that followed, a new dynamic established itself in the house. There was nothing declared, nothing official, but there were glances that lingered a little longer, smiles that carried extra meanings, conversations that extended beyond the necessary. Helen was the first to notice. "Lucy," she said during one of their study sessions, "you seem different, more radiant." "I do?" "You do. And Edward, too. You both have that sparkle in your eyes that says—" Helen paused, studying her friend. "Did something happen between you two?" Lucy hesitated. She had promised herself not to involve Helen in the situation until she was sure of what was happening. "Helen, can I ask you a theoretical question?" "Sure." "What would you think if, hypothetically, Edward were romantically interested in someone?" Helen set her book aside and looked directly at Lucy. "It depends. Would this hypothetical person be good for him? For the girls?" "She would." "Then I would think it's wonderful." "Edward became a widower at 35, Lucy. He's too young to spend the rest of his life alone." Helen paused. "Would this hypothetical person happen to be you?" Lucy blushed. "He talked to me, said some things, but I'm scared, Helen." "Scared of what?" "Of ruining everything. This family saved me, gave me a new life. If anything goes wrong, Helen got up from her chair and sat next to Lucy on the couch. "Lucy, can I tell you how I feel seeing you two together?" "How?" "I see my son smiling for real for the first time in 3 years. I see my granddaughters with a mother figure who loves them unconditionally. I see you blooming into the extraordinary woman you've always been." Helen held her friend's hands. "And I see two people who complete each other in a way that is rare to find. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? Lucy, you've spent your whole life taking care of others. Isn't it time to let someone take care of you too?" That night, Lucy made a decision. When Edward came home from work, she was waiting for him on the porch with 2 glasses of wine and a determined expression. "I thought about what we talked about," she said as he sat down beside her. And I think you're right. Maybe it's time for us to build something beautiful together." The smile that spread across Edward's face was brighter than all the lights of Malibu. "Are you sure?" "I am. But Edward—" "Yes? Let's take it slow, okay? For the sake of the girls and for us too." "Slow," he agreed, gently taking her hand. "We have all the time in the world." And that night, for the first time in years, they both fell asleep with the feeling that the future held infinite possibilities for happiness, but they still didn't know that the greatest test of their love was coming, one that would challenge not only their feelings, but the solidity of the entire family they had built together. December arrived with a peculiar urgency. Lucy had nearly completed a full year in Malibu, and an inevitable reflection hung in the air. Where would everyone be when the first anniversary of her arrival was celebrated? The question was not just temporal, but existential, affecting each member of that family in a unique way. Everyone's transformation was as visible as the flowers blooming in the garden tended by Anna Claire. Helen had become an exemplary student, frequently praised by teachers as the most engaged student in the class, and was already making plans for a specialization in special education. Edward had come to be recognized not only as a successful businessman, but as a present father. Other children from the girls' school commented with admiration about the dad who always shows up at presentations and knows all his daughter's friends' names. The girls had flourished in unique ways. Sophie had developed a natural leadership that made her sought after by peers to mediate conflicts. Lucy had discovered that her artistic ability was extraordinary and was already receiving invitations to participate in youth exhibitions. Anna Claire had become the plant girl at school, helping to create a community garden. And Bella had developed a radiant confidence that made her shine in any social setting. But it was the relationship between Lucy and Edward that had become the silent heart of all this transformation. In the last 3 months, they had navigated with extraordinary care through the delicate territories of a love that was growing amidst family responsibilities and social expectations. There was no rush, no drama, just a solid and respectful building of a bond that felt inevitable from day one. It was a Thursday morning when Lucy received a call that would change everything. "Hello, this is Lucy." "Lucy, I finally managed to reach you." The voice on the other end was familiar, though she couldn't immediately identify it. "This is Mark from the Department of Education of rural Pennsylvania. Do you remember me?" "Mark! Of course I remember. How did you get my number?" "Through your former school coordinator, Lucy. I need to talk to you about an incredible opportunity." Lucy felt her heart race. Opportunities from rural Pennsylvania usually meant one thing. Someone wanted her to come back. What opportunity? The City Hall has approved a project to create a model community school in the outskirts of the city, a school that serves children in situations of social vulnerability, with a differentiated methodology, specialized teachers, and we want you as the educational coordinator. The silence that followed was thick with implications. "Mark, I've been living in California for almost a year. I have commitments here. I know, Lucy. And that's why the offer is even better. The salary is 3 times higher than anything you would earn at a private school here, housing included, company car, and full autonomy to implement your educational ideas. It's the chance to realize that project you've always dreamed of." Lucy slowly sat down, feeling the weight of the proposal. "Mark, can I think about it? It's a very big decision." "Of course. But Lucy, I need an answer by the end of the year. The project starts in March, and you would be essential in structuring everything from the beginning." When she hung up the phone, Lucy remained still in the kitchen for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what she had just heard. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had always dreamed of, the chance to create something from scratch, to implement her educational vision, to make a difference on a larger scale. But it meant leaving behind the family that had become her reason for living. Throughout the day, Lucy carried the weight of the pending decision. She went through her routine as usual, prepared meals, helped with homework, mediated small conflicts between the sisters. But her mind was divided between 2 worlds, the one she had built there and the one she could build in rural Pennsylvania. At night, when the girls went to bed, she knew she needed to talk to Edward. She couldn't make a decision of that magnitude without discussing it with him. "Edward," she said when he appeared in the kitchen for his usual evening tea, "I need to talk to you about something important." He immediately noticed the seriousness in her tone. "Did something happen?" "I received a job offer today in rural Pennsylvania." Edward stopped mid-motion of sitting down, his expression closing. "What kind of offer?" Lucy told him about the call, about the project, about the unique opportunity to create a school from scratch. Edward listened to her in silence, but she could see the impact of her words on his expression. "It's an incredible opportunity," he said when she finished. "It is. It's exactly the kind of work you've always wanted to do. It is. And you're thinking about accepting it." Lucy looked him directly in the eyes. "I am considering it, yes. Edward, it's the chance to fulfill a dream I've had since that I graduated." Edward stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. "I understand, and I can't ask you to give up a dream because of us." "Edward, no, Lucy. You're right, this is your chance. And as much as it hurts to think about losing you." He turned around and she saw tears welling in his eyes. "I can't be selfish enough to try to keep you here. What if I don't want to go? Wanting is different from having to. You owe it to yourself to take this opportunity." They stood in silence for long minutes, each lost in thoughts that seemed impossible to vocalize. "Edward," Lucy finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Can we not make any decisions tonight? Can I think for a few more days?" "Of course you can. But Lucy..." "Yes. Whatever your decision is, I want you to know that you have changed our lives forever, and nothing can change that." The following Friday, Lucy made a decision that surprised everyone. She called a family meeting. She told Edward that she wanted to talk to Helen and the girls about the job offer, feeling that they deserved to be part of the decision that would affect them all. At 7 in the evening, everyone gathered in the living room. Helen had arrived earlier, sensing from Lucy's voice on the phone that something important was happening. The girls settled on the couch, clearly intrigued by the unusual formality of the situation. "I need to tell you something," Lucy began, her hands slightly trembling. "I received a job offer, a very good offer in rural Pennsylvania, to coordinate an educational project that has always been my dream." The silence that followed was heavy with gradual understanding. "Are you leaving?" Bella asked with her characteristic frankness. I don't know yet, Bella. That's why I want to talk to you. I want to know what you think. Sophie, always the first to process complex situations, asked, "Is this opportunity important to you, Aunt Lucy?" "Very important. More important than staying here." The question hit Lucy like an arrow. "It's not a matter of importance, Sophie. It's a matter of purpose, of making a difference in the lives of many children who need it." Anna Claire spoke up for the first time. "But you already make a difference. You made a difference in our lives. And you will make a difference in the lives of other children if you accept this job," Helen gently intervened. "Girls, sometimes the people we love need to follow their dreams, even if it means being away for a while." "For a while?" Lucy asked. "Does that mean she can come back?" It was Edward who answered, "Girls, Aunt Lucy will always be part of our family, no matter where she is. But we have to understand that she has her own life, her own dreams." Bella began to cry silently. "But I don't want you to leave. You are our Aunt Lucy." Lucy knelt in front of Bella, holding her little hands. "Bella, do you remember that story I tell you to help you sleep? About the little seed that needs to be planted in new soil to become a big tree?" "I remember. Sometimes people also need to be planted in new places to grow and help others grow too." Sophie, with her maturity beyond her years, asked the question everyone was thinking. "Aunt Lucy, what is your heart telling you to do?" Lucy looked at each face around her, at Bella with her tearful eyes, at Anna, Claire trying to be strong, at Lucy hugging a pillow, at Sophie waiting for an honest answer, at Helen with her understanding expression, at Edward trying to hide his own pain. "My heart is divided," she said honestly. "One part wants to stay here with you, forever. Another part knows that I need to try to fulfill this dream. So maybe," Helen said softly, "the question isn't what to choose, but how to make both parts of your heart find peace." Edward looked at his mother, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Helen leaned forward. "Lucy, how long would this project last? The initial contract is for 2 years, but it can be renewed. And the girls, what do you think about spending the summer in rural Pennsylvania, seeing Aunt Lucy's project, seeing where she grew up?" The eyes of the 4 girls lit up simultaneously. "Can we do that, Dad?" Sophie asked. Edward looked at Lucy, a new understanding shining in his eyes. "Of course we can, and we can visit her whenever possible, and she can come here whenever she wants." "And after 2 years?" Anna Claire asked, always practical. It was Lucy who answered, a certainty growing in her chest. "After 2 years, I will come home, because I realized something today." "What?" they all asked at the same time. "That home is not a place. Home is where the people we love are, and no matter how far I go, you will always be my home." That night, after much talking, planning, and even shedding a few tears, they reached a consensus. Lucy would accept the offer, but not as a farewell, and instead as a new chapter in the family story they had built together. Edward was the last to remain in the living room when everyone else had gone upstairs. "Lucy, can I tell you something?" "You can. I love you, and because I love you, I want you to soar high. I want you to fulfill all your dreams. Even if that means being away? Even if that means being away, because I know that true love doesn't diminish with distance." Lucy approached him, touching his face tenderly. "Edward, would you want to come with me?" The question caught him completely off guard. "What do you mean?" "The company can operate from anywhere these days. The girls can study in rural Pennsylvania for 2 years. We can start a new life there together, as a family." Edward looked at her as if he were witnessing a miracle. "Would you do that? Share your dream with us?" "My dream only makes sense if I can share it with you." The kiss that followed sealed not only the commitment between them, but the fate of a family. Lucy had learned that true love is the one that grows when shared. March. 1 year later. The community school in rural Pennsylvania was celebrating. After 9 months of operation, it had become a national model for inclusive education, receiving visits from educators across the country. Lucy, as the educational coordinator, had implemented innovative methodologies that respected local cultural specifics while providing international quality education. Helen, who had graduated with honors in education, worked as the vice coordinator of the school, finally fulfilling the dream she had abandoned at 20, now at 63. Edward had adapted his business to rural Pennsylvania, discovering that he could be equally successful while living a more balanced life close to family. The girls had magnificently adapted to life in the countryside. Sophie was developing a school mediation project inspired by local storytelling culture. Anna Claire had created a garden that provided food for the school lunch. Lucy taught arts to younger children, and Bella had become the official school mascot, her contagious joy winning everyone over. At the school's 1-year anniversary celebration, while watching the community children play with his daughters, Edward hugged Lucy from behind. "You did it," he whispered in her ear. "We did it," she corrected him. "All of us." "And now? What's the next dream?" Lucy smiled, placing her hands over his. "Now? Now it's just to live happily, one day at a time, knowing that sometimes happy endings are just new beginnings in disguise." And there, under the vast sky of rural Pennsylvania, surrounded by laughing children, by the family they chose to be, and by the dreams that became reality because they were shared with love, they all understood that they had found the true meaning of the word home. A family that started with a nanny hired to care for 4 rebellious girls had transformed into a community of love that changed not only their own lives, but the lives of hundreds of children, who now had access to quality education and, most importantly, to the unconditional love that believes in the potential of every human being. Because in the end, the best stories are not about the destinations we reach, but about the people we choose to walk with us along the way. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and if you watched until here, comment, "I watched until here," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very exciting.